Welcome and thanks for joining me on Talk the Walk. I'm Sarah Wong. The European Union has ramped up inoculation efforts after coming under fire for its sluggish rollout of COVID-19 vaccines. The pandemic has also strained China's ties with Europe, which has become increasingly critical of Beijing's human rights record. So what lies ahead in Europe's maneuvering with allies and competitors with the renewed commitment from the United States? George Mason University Assistant Professor of History, Kevin Matthe, joins us now to explore these topics. Kevin, it's great to have you with us.
Glad to be with you.
So, as we know, the vaccination situation in Europe, and are the Europeans wrong to trust in institutions in the era of COVID-19? Should they do this, tackle the COVID-19 pandemic individually as a nation?
Well, their best bet for solving the crisis is collectively, because they're a trading bloc, more than a trading bloc. They're an integrated unit now. With the Schengen agreement, you can cross borders without a passport. So, no, it makes sense to work on this collectively. The problem has been that the rollout of the COVID vaccines in the EU has been so slow simply because they haven't had the manufacturing capacity to make the vaccines that they need. And you do see some countries that are getting anxious about this. They feel that the only way to restart their economies naturally is to have as many people vaccinated as possible. So last Friday, the nation of Hungary unilaterally negotiated a deal with Russia for doses of its Sputnik V vaccine without going to the EU first. And that to me is a sign that Hungary anyway is willing to pull away. I don't think too many other East European countries are going to want to fall into Russia's orbit further than Hungary seems to be willing to do. But that's part of a larger story with Hungary. They have been an increasing thorn in the side of the rest of the EU as they become a more authoritarian state.
So would you go so far to suggest that the EU bureaucracy is ill-suited for public health challenges?
Well, the part of the problem here is that they haven't got a central European health agency. It's left up to the individual country. So you, in some ways, have the worst of all worlds. You've got the EU is in overall charge, but you have the individual countries running their own health systems. So they either need to go one way or the other. And that's really what people like President Emmanuel Macron of France wants to do. He wants a more integrated Europe. And with Britain now out of the EU, it seems that that's the way they're going to go. But it's a slow process, and no one expected this pandemic, of course. And like many other places, they're feeling their way. So I wouldn't be too harsh on the EU as a whole. I think it's been more a case where they are making their stumbles like everybody else is. It's nothing compared to, say, what Boris Johnson initially did in Britain, where he even toyed with the idea of having herd immunity early on, or here in the United States with former President Donald Trump, who was talking about people ingesting bleach. So when you compare what the EU has done with what has happened in countries like Britain and the United States, and never mind Brazil, where President Bolsonaro still won't admit that there's a problem, I think that's being a little too harsh on them.
Okay, yeah. Well, the United States has suffered its own toll after the much criticized handling of the pandemic of previous President Donald Trump. But now let's go back to the European Union. And you mentioned the French President Emmanuel Macron and also its neighbor, Germany, is pressing the idea of EU integration and underscoring EU spirit during the COVID pandemic. But do you see any negative impact on its citizens and on the whole idea of EU integration after the sluggish vaccination drive in the European Union?
I think if it goes much longer, then yes, there's going to be a backlash. But if they can get their act together and they can start producing these vaccines that they need, then no, it'll be a temporary glitch. But it's the same as true of these other countries, Britain, the United States, elsewhere. Everything depends on showing the people of these EU countries, in the instance you're asking about, that the EU can work, that it can solve this problem. So far, they haven't done so. So everything is going to depend on, I'd say, the next 9 months.
You also mentioned Britain's response to the pandemic. Now, Britain left the EU last year after 4 years of tumultuous negotiations. And Prime Minister Boris Johnson's initial handling of the pandemic also received a lot of criticism and backlash from its Conservative Party and also the wider English public. But its vaccination campaign has been hailed as a leading global sample. For example, Britain surpassed the rest of Europe on total vaccinations and was also almost 3 weeks ahead of the EU to approve its first vaccine. Doesn't Britain deserve credit for that?
Oh, certainly. I mean, British scientists, the National Health Service, they all deserve credit. I'd be a little reluctant to give Boris Johnson credit for it because he's been reactive instead of proactive. You have to remember, too, that the British are now on their third lockdown, and this one has been perhaps the most severe. Now, very slowly, Britain is coming out of this third lockdown, and the feeling is that they can't do it again. So that's why Johnson has to get this right, and that's why he's being cautious for the first time in this pandemic. He's finally listening to his scientific experts. The problem he's got now is that the right wing of the Conservative Party, or the Tories, want a complete end to the lockdown. They want to get back to, as they would put it, business as usual. They're getting a lot of pressure from British businesses, but they've done that before. They let their foot off the brake before, and they've run into the ditch of the coronavirus all over again. That's one thing that Johnson doesn't want to do. You have to remember, too, that the United Kingdom is 4 nations. It's England, but it's also Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland. And all 3 of those other nations also have their own policies about coming out of lockdown that are not entirely the same. And the real sticking block here is Scotland, because the Scottish National Party is going to hold elections in May for the Scottish Parliament. If they win a decisive victory, then the SNP will use that victory to claim the right for another independence referendum. The Scotland wants, the SNP anyway, wants Scotland to become a fully independent nation and have it rejoin the European Union. You've got another problem in Northern Ireland. When the UK pulled out of the EU with Brexit, the British public was divided over this, and they weren't told what the consequences were going to be. One of them was, what do we do about the land border in Northern Ireland between the Irish Republic and Northern Ireland? So what you've got now is, in effect, a border in the Irish Sea between the rest of Britain and Northern Ireland. And Northern Ireland unionists don't like it. So they want a renegotiation of the Brexit deal. And all these factors, believe it or not, feed into the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. If Johnson can get the country back on its feet, he'll have the maneuvering room he needs to deal with the Brexit troubles that he, frankly, is largely responsible for.
The EU vaccine response also has a crucial impact in German politics, where political elites are vying for the country's leadership in this year's general election. Now, how will a post-Merkel Germany steer the path of the EU?
Well, Germany is always going to be the driving force of the EU. France would like to be. But the fact of the matter is that ever since Germany has been a united nation, it has been the engine that drives Europe. So whoever leads Germany is going to be in a very strong position as an EU leader. Angela Merkel has made it quite clear that she is going to leave office with a Germany that is looking outward as an EU leader, is no longer going to be in the shadow of the United States. It's going to do its deals with Russia when it wants to. It is going to engage with China in the way that it sees fit. It's not going to be a Germany or an EU any longer that is willing to follow America's lead. And that became clear last week at the Munich Security Conference when our new president, Joe Biden, spoke. And he would like to go back to the status quo ante before the Trump administration, when the United States was the leader and most of Europe was willing to follow. That's not going to happen. I think that the American people are in for a rude awakening when they discovered that the America First policy that Donald Trump led them into is a dead end, and they no longer are going to necessarily be followed. So Germany, a new German leader is going to be willing to put Germany, like President Macron of France said, on an equal footing with the United States, not as a junior partner.
Okay, let's take a short break here. We'll be right back. Stay with us.